Next bit of news is about Half-Life Alyx, as we had a few updates from the game, about the game this week from the development team from Valve. And they had an AMA session, which is an Ask Me Anything session, on the Half-Life subreddit this Wednesday. A lot of interesting stuff came out of this AMA, so I sort of picked out some of the most popular ones, and I'll sort of read them out.
Bless us with juiciness.
Yeah, have you guys got any, or shall I just go ahead with mine?
No, you can share yours. Sure.
Okay. So the first question was, how many people are working on Half-Life Alyx? And they said right now is around 80 people, which puts it as the largest single team we've ever had at Valve.
Wow.
Which is pretty impressive. Like, especially if you consider other projects.
Sounds like a prepared answer, though, a little bit.
80 people, though.
No, it's a substantial. That's the size of large development studios.
Well, it would be a shame if you didn't count right and you missed one, right? So that's why the answer is so.
The 81 is now going like,
summer intern.
Yeah. I'm just an intern.
Yeah. Okay. So we thank you, 80 people that are working on Half-Life Alyx, to bring the game to us. We really appreciate it. Also, they were asked about the locomotion and comfort options, which has been a bit of a sort of issue of contention about this game because of the sort of leaked footage from like Jeff Keighley and tested and that sort of thing. But they said our locomotion and comfort features are all done, including things like seated, left-handed mode, etc. We have almost all our accessibility work done as well, but there's a little bit more we'd like to do there. Support for one-armed play being an example. We'll be talking about and showing more of our various locomotion options in some upcoming videos.
So we're going to see some satisfying letter gameplay.
Yeah, so I think that the smooth locomotion, a lot of like the VR enthusiasts want smooth locomotion, right? But like we said before, there could be issues if the game was developed with teleportation in mind, because games like Apex Construct.
Yes.
Was originally developed with teleportation in mind, but then added smooth locomotion, which caused a few issues when you'd get stuck in an environment or assets. So hopefully that's not the case with this game. But it's cool that they've added modes for like left-handed players.
That's amazing. I've never heard that before, where someone really,
And also for one-armed play. So if you only have one arm, for example, then you can still enjoy the game, which is also really great. And seated as well. So for those that maybe can't stand and play the game. So again, I like the fact that they've considered these options and they've added those into the game as well.
So left-handed is quite important. My wife's a lefty, and one of the things we ran across yesterday was that, I didn't know this, but Beat Saber, when you play a song, if you're a right-handed or a left-handed person, you're actually getting a different sequence of blocks. You're getting the opposite colors.
Oh, really?
They don't just mirror it. So like if you're used to on that swipe getting a gold block, then the other one's getting the red block. It's really interesting. We saw that in a side-by-side we were doing, which kind of flicked the switch in my brain. But left-handed options are relatively, they're not common. They're maybe uncommon, but they do exist across VR titles, and they're really important. It's 10% of the population. The one-handed, the fact that they mentioned potential for one-handed support or one-arm support, I've not heard that before. I've not heard that in a VR game, and I think that's great that they're even thinking about it and dedicating a resource to it.
But isn't being left-handed far less of a problem in a game, in a VR game, just because you have those two motion controllers?
It's the reload, it's the reload mechanics in some games. If you think about the way that people reload, that's the issue when it comes to shooters particularly, and scopes.
And parity. So for instance, game like Gadgeteer, your right hand and your left hand are doing different things, and the intricate control is typically given to the right hand. So if you don't have a left hand mode to swap them, then you can't just pass your controllers.
I wonder, I don't know, I don't suppose any of you guys know that, but for example, in the army, those rifles, do they also have left-handed and right-handed rifles then?
I doubt it.
Oh, that's a good question.
Because,
I mean, in terms of flicking the... I don't think so.
I think you just have to adapt. I think you adapt to that muscle memory.
There's a lot. From a
neuroscience
perspective, there's actually a lot of things about that people actually are not really left-handed. I can't confirm any of the research on that because it's not my. But I read a few articles. Is that it's actually from a very early age that children make a certain choice of preference. Mm-hmm. And because they are not being forced into, for example, being right-handed, that often they develop a stronger development for their left hand. And that could explain the lower percentage of tempo.
Answering your question, So there are right and left-handed guns, but it says left-handed users get burns and bruises from using right-handed designed guns. For example, Ian is left-handed and shoots most guns left-handed, but most people are right-handed, and most guns are designed with right-handed people in mind.
There you go.
Very interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Next question was, will there be a train ride in Half-Life Alyx? And they replied, it's quite funny, this one. It's actually illegal to ship a Half-Life game if you don't spend at least a little time riding a train.
That's cute.
One thing that we were kind of interested about, which we touched on earlier on, when Half-Life Alyx releases, will we be getting the full Source 2 SDK? And this is kind of what we mentioned about modders getting their hands on this game, adding their own levels or game spin-offs, like, Counter-Strike was a spin-off of, the original Half-Life, etc. And they replied saying, we're not currently planning on shipping a full SDK. We'd really like to release one at some point, but it's a ton of work because Source 2 is a new tool set, much of which hasn't previously been released. Any time we spend on it now is also time we could be spending on polishing the game itself, which we think is more important. As a result, we thought it wasn't appropriate to promise anything before release. So it's likely that some tools will be released, which they've sort of confirmed, but the full SDK won't be available. So people will still be able to mod the game, but it just won't be the full suite of tools that we probably want just yet. But probably will come after release, which is still fine. Because people are still making mods for the original Half-Life games now, many, many years later. Yeah. So I'm happy that it will come eventually. And I'm sure, with that mod support, like we saw in Blade and Sorcery, it's going to extend the life of the game a long way into the future. The next one was, you seemed confident in releasing the game on time, which is super, super important to me. We touched on this on last week's show as well. How much would you say of the game is done? And they replied, with the exception of some tweaks to the absolute final scene, the game is done. Lots of us at Valve, as well as playtesters, have played through the entire game multiple times. Right now, we're primarily polishing and fixing bugs, which is where we'd hope to be at this point in the development cycle, but confident we'll hit our intended release.
Which great.
I'm happy with. So March is still set. I know a lot of other games have been delayed just recently, but it looks like this one's going to be still on track for a March release. Which
would have been far more entertaining if they said, we are only 10% confident that we're going to release on time, but
we have our concept art done.
Yeah. But I'm hoping now, that we're going to start getting some more videos coming soon. Like they keep on talking about releasing videos of different gameplay features and stuff.
I really hope they don't. I don't want to see any of this game up until I
You just don't want to spoil it?
I'm the same.
Fair enough.
Yeah, why do you want, why wouldn't you want the story start to finish as they intended? I mean, why would you want trailers of an upcoming movie to keep coming?
It just gets me hyped. It just gets me hyped when I see stuff.
If it's core gameplay, yes, but if it's story-driven trailers, then
no spoilers.
I don't want to know it.
That's understandable. No. And the final question, which I picked out, was, will we be seeing any familiar faces that we haven't already seen in the trailer? And they just simply replied saying yes. So Barney or maybe some of the scientists we know and love could make a comeback for this game. Because obviously it takes place before Half-Life 2. We've got to remember that.
I do hope we get to see the general scientist from Half-Life 1. That he's just every general scientist in Half-Life Alyx 2.
It's so funny. When I recorded Half-Life on the Quest, people were saying that I screamed like the scientist. Everyone commenting was saying I screamed like the scientist, like I voiced him originally or something. Just coincidence. So there you go. But also, alongside the AMA, we also got some good news that if you haven't played a Half-Life game in your life, you lived under a rock or whatever. I think Zim is one of those people, aren't you, Zim?
No, I bought and played all the Half-Life games.
Someone, I can't remember who it was now.
I haven't played them from beginning to end.
Okay. But you still understand the sort of basic premise.
Story. Yeah.
So if you haven't played them and you want to understand more about the story and the lore and everything about it, you can play them all for free. They're all available for free to play on Steam up until Half-Life Alyx releases. So you've got a few months to check them out.
Then again, is there anyone who hasn't had it yet because it comes free with everything that Valve ever sold? I remember that I got the I think the Steam controller or something, and I just got the orange box for free, which could take everything.
Yeah, it's a bargain. It's amazing. But just to let you know, the timeline, so you got it clear in your mind. There's Half-Life 1 in the timeline, then it's Half-Life Alyx, then it's Half-Life 2, and then it's Half-Life 2 episodes 1 and 2. And Alyx is a key character in episode 1 and 2 and Half-Life 2. So if you want to understand more about her story before you get into the Half-Life Alyx, then you might want to check those out.
And right after Half-Life episode 2, Half-Life 3?
We don't know anything about Half-Life 3 yet. No.
It is important to note as well, like I mentioned in the beginning about like mute characters. Like Half-Life has been known to have a mute character throughout the series, but this will likely be the first one of the Half-Life series that won't be mute because it revolves around Alyx, which of course, even in the other Half-Life games, is not a mute character, so she'll probably have a voice. And I don't know what to think of that. Like I said it before as well, like I like it when my character is mute because it allows a little bit more immersion on my end. You know, it allows me more to experience it like that. But I mean, it's Half-Life, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah,
I think they do it really well in like Arizona Sunshine. I like the kind of overarching narration at certain segments, but not the I'm in a video watching who I'm supposed to be interacting with someone else. I prefer it that way because then it feels like it's kind of coming out of you and it's part of the story then. But I'm kind of with you, Rowdy, in terms of immersion. It does allow more for the imagination when you don't hear yourself speaking.
Yeah. I think the most important thing I learned from this AMA is that, first of all, if you want to get rid of a head crab, you can just throw a bucket on it. And the other one is floating hands are okay. It's fine.
Yep. And also, just to a note on the floating hands is that although you don't see the rest of the arm, it is actually there. So if you interact with an object with your arm, it does actually interact with it still, even though it's not visible.
Yeah.
You mean like knocking over a bottle? What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and it's still sort of generated, you know, with an elbow and your shoulder attached to the headset and everything else, just like Boneworks, but you just don't see that segment of the arm.
Right.
Is the way that they described it. So that is Half-Life Alyx. Some updates from the development team. Very nice.